Good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. I'd like to welcome you to the session from the DSI Scientific Network on digital sequence information, also known as DSI. I'd like to give you, as your chair, Dr. Amber Hartman Scholz, a little insight into what the problem is. What is the issue with digital sequence information? So, the problem starts here. There is an international law in place that governs access to genetic resources called the Nagoya Protocol. The Nagoya Protocol says that you have to ask for permission before you take biological material out of a country. And in doing so, you have to agree to share benefits back to that country of origin. However, one of the challenges of the Nagoya Protocol is that it's quite complex for users to negotiate. So all of the principles of the Nagoya Protocol and of fair and equitable benefit sharing are incredibly important. The actual practical way that this is done is dependent upon the country in which you are conducting research and dependent upon the procedures that that country has chosen to put into place. So in every case, you have to first identify in the clearinghouse called the ABS clearinghouse which authority you need to contact and ask them, how do I comply? And then some kind of a permitting system that might be known as PIC or MAT, MTAs, will be put in place to regulate access and require compliance. And then often some kind of reporting is required. This needs to be done for all kinds of living organisms and for non-commercial and commercial use. Now, this procedure, while feasible for genetic resources, for sampling campaigns, for going out and doing field research, is manageable but often quite cumbersome. The question becomes, what is the compatibility of doing this for other kinds of resources, for example, online or digital resources? So the Nagoya Protocol was negotiated in 2010, right here, following that blue arrow down at the bottom. On the x-axis is time, and on the y-axis is the numbers of millions of sequences that have gone into the public databases. So the explosion in DNA sequencing, combined with the fact that there have been new biotechnological developments, namely from synthetic biology and from gene editing, so CRISPR-Cas9, compared with all the synthetic biology tools listed on the left, means that the databases showing us sequence data combined with these tools means I don't have to go back into the country of origin as much as I used to have to, where benefit sharing is required, meaning that there is now perceived to be a loophole in the Nagoya Protocol. So in short, the argument that scientists have been making, including this group called the Scientific Network, is that DSI is not compatible with the existing Nagoya Protocol regulatory framework governing genetic resources. DSI is a big data field. Its data set is 280 million sequences. This whole data set is downloaded 34 million times per year by 10 to 15 million users. These interconnected databases mainly rely on one core global set of data called the International Nucleotide Sequence Database Collaboration, which is 3 databases run by Japan, the European Union, and the United States, GenBank, ENA, and DDBJ. And that main core database is then interlinked with 1,200 interconnected databases for other subfields or other omics data sets or specialty fields. Then all of these data types are cited in about 500,000 DSI citing or using publications, in which an average about 44 sequences per publication is used. So if you look at this whole ecosystem, this, we have been arguing, is not compatible with that very first flowchart of going back to individual countries and asking for individual permission to be able to do this kind of a big data analysis. So fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, the dilemma that the policymakers and we supporting them as scientists have to face and address is that DSI creates a growing loophole in the Nagoya Protocol. However, the Nagoya Protocol's regulatory framework doesn't fit as a way for benefit sharing to happen in a fair and equitable way, meaning this situation of calling for benefit sharing from DSI is fair, reasonable, we support that, but yet we are calling also for the fact that the Nagoya Protocol is not the right way to solve this problem. So where are we in the political process? It's kind of a busy slide just to tell you that there's been a lot of meetings, a lot of online webinars. On the left, in the upper left, you sort of see the process as it was supposed to be between 2018 to 2020 before the pandemic got it off track, in which there were a number of studies that were commissioned. There was an AdTech, which is an ad hoc technical expert group. Informal processes then went underway during the pandemic situation. Then in 2021, the Open-Ended Working Group 3 finally met in person for the first time following the pandemic, and began to negotiate for the first time sort of concrete policy options for DSI and to craft elements of a draft decision. That process also called into action a DSI informal advisory group, an IAG, on which I and others in the network participate. And then that advisory group has been feeding information into another open-ended working group meeting, which took place in Nairobi in June, and will continue to bring information and insight into the COP15 process. So looking here on the bottom are the official sort of names of those meetings, and we find ourselves on that bottom right orange arrow right at the cusp of that, waiting now for the meeting to take place in Montreal in early December. Importantly for us scientists, since we access the global data set and we actually touch DSI from many different UN international jurisdictions, including the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Health Organization, the World Intellectual Property Organization. And another aspect of what we've been calling for is to say, can we please try to create a solution for DSI that can be harmonized across all of these international fora so that we don't ultimately have 5 or 6 different types of rules that we have to follow when we use and work with the full global data set. And this, of course, is because, as you probably all know, data is sourced from everywhere in the world, but it all lands in one global data set. So the idea for a global solution is to address the fact that the data is already tangled up together. So there have been really 2 key outputs of the DSI Scientific Network this year. One is this paper that we published in Nature Communications calling for benefit sharing, but also saying that it needs to happen in a multilateral way in order to support both science and biodiversity conservation. We brought together 41 authors from 17 countries, all members of the network, to really lay out the case for why benefit sharing needs to be decoupled from access, but yet how it can be done in a fair and equitable manner. Furthermore, we listed in that paper 5 principles of what that benefit sharing solution needs to account for. Number 1, open access. We really call for a divorce between access, which needs to be open, and benefit sharing. This sort of well-known acronym, ABS, access and benefit sharing, all in one breath, cannot be the reality, is not the solution for DSI. Number 2, simplicity. Because the science is complicated, because of this big data world, the solution has to be simple. The legal framework must be simple. Number 3, we call for harmonization, for the compatibility of other international treaties to work within this process. We also think that biodiversity conservation, sustainable use, green growth, bioeconomy needs to be mutually supported by a DSI solution. And we even believe that there's a possibility for a positive feedback loop in which the sovereign rights of countries are recognized and the credit is given to low and middle income countries for their participation in the global system, perhaps through a series of bonus payments for those countries that put more data into the system, then more comes out. And when I say put more data into the system, I mean providing access to the physical genetic resources from which collaborators and in-country scientists might also generate the DSI. Number 5, also important to account for fairness and transparency, that the databases should not be police about how DSI is used, but they can provide insight into the country of origin and the use of DSI. And the second major output of the DSI Scientific Network was our open letter. This is a letter from over, I think, 1,500 signatories now. I need to update the slide, and really lays out for policymakers the case for why open access. With that, I would like to turn it over to other members of the DSI Scientific Network, and they're going to tell us how they use DSI and why this open, public, free database is so important for them to be able to do their work around the edges of biodiversity genomics. Thank you.